Hello, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up, where I talk about the books that I read, what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week based on my mood. I had a great reading week, except for there was one book that, man, really surprised me, and not in a good way. But let's get first to the books that I did like. So the first book that I finished this week, I did the audio of this. This was Family Meal by Bryan Washington. Now, I have really liked Bryan Washington's previous works. And so when this came up as a hold from my public library in audio form, I decided to jump on it. And it was narrated by three different narrators, including Bryan Washington himself. The other were Andre Santana and Jake Choi. And they did a fantastic job. Now, this is really the story of found family. It's a story of community specific to these two gay men and a dead lover. So the first character that we meet is Cam, and Cam is really struggling. And he's found himself back in Houston after spending a few years in LA with his lover, Kai. Kai has since died, and Cam is really taking it hard. But he's not really talking about it. But he sees Kai. He's visited by Kai. He's going through the motions of living, but he's also making a lot of self-destructive decisions in his life. He's at the bar that he's working at, and all of a sudden walks in TJ. And TJ is someone who was very special to him. TJ and his family had taken Cam in when he was younger. It was clear that TJ was very hurt, very angry, very taken aback, and that Cam would return and not contact them. So much so that I think he feels like, well, maybe he overestimated the friendship and the amount of caring and the closeness with which he thought they had. And the story reminds me so much of the Buddhist talk about nourishments, and be careful of your nourishments. And so your body will take in a bunch of things. Some are good and some are bad. And your job is to, if you want to be happy and live a good life, is to balance the good and to take in good nourishments. And so the family meal is really kind of that good nourishment. It's not just about eating and nutrition. It's also about the community. It's about the caring, the love, the connection, the honesty, sex, all of those things that are really needed for a good life. So this was a very lustful book. And it was more about the grasping and the searching and the seeking of connection and the seeking of comfort, and maybe looking for it in places that it didn't exist. So I liked it. I think I liked his previous work just a little bit better than this one, but another strong showing from Bryan Washington. I had a very nice surprise with this book. This was The Spanish Diplomat's Secret, and this is the third in a series that I kind of thought I wasn't going to return to by Nev Marsh. The series is Captain Jim and Lady Diana Mysteries. This is set between the wars. We have our main protagonist and his wife. So that's Captain Jim and Lady Diana, and he's a detective. He is ex-military who has suffered some pretty horrific PTSD. And he has moved to the United States with his wife, Lady Diana. And he's obsessed with Sherlock Holmes and Sherlock Holmes techniques. And he has been able to put that into play and to become an actual paid detective. So he's very, very happy. But there's something wrong in the relationship. And he's deeply in love with Diana, and thought that their marriage was fantastic and on strong footing. So he's very surprised when she's turning away from him, where she's getting short with him, where there just seems to be roughness there. And he keeps trying to bring it up, and he doesn't know how to face it or how to bring it to light. So he thought that a trip back to England on this voyage, on this ship, would be a good way to spend some quality time with her, not have any work kind of looming, not have anything distracting him, and then also take her to see her family as a kind of gift of love. So they are on this journey, and immediately he suffers absolutely horrific seasickness and is by himself on the deck, and a Spanish gentleman helps him. And a very refined, very sophisticated gentleman. They talk just briefly, because obviously Captain Jim can't do a lot of talking. He's horribly sick. But they introduce themselves to each other, and then he is kind of helped back to his cabin to lay down. The next day, he receives a note, a very delayed note from one of the porters that is from this gentleman, this Don Juan. And Don Juan had asked him to come and said it was vitally important. He needed him urgently. By the time he gets there, Don Juan has been killed. And the captain was there. The captain hears that he's a private investigator and tries to foist it all on him. So he doesn't want to have any of his people actually figuring out what happened, because he doesn't want to throw the reputation of the ship into jeopardy. Because there are a lot of very famous, very important people on this ship. Really, Captain Jim only has 6 days to solve this mystery. So it's very much a set number of people on this massive ship that he has to figure out how he's going to solve the crime. And he feels personally responsible because of the plea that came to him. What is making this more challenging is not just the class issues, but also there's diplomatic protocol because of Don Juan's role in the government. He was a very, very important man, and he was cousin to the king. So there is a lot at stake, and it's a very twisty, turny, a page turner of a book that I actually am really glad I read, because when I read the first book in this series, Murder in Old Bombay, I felt like there was way too much exposition. It took way too long to get to the point. I was actually bored through it and thought, oh, I just don't think this is going to be for me. So I didn't actually do the second. And only when I saw this on NetGalley did I say, okay, I'll give it another try. I'm very glad I did, because I enjoyed it tremendously and look forward to going back, reading the second, and then following forward. Now let's talk about the book that I couldn't do. I just couldn't. Despite this being one of the Booker shortlist books, it was not for me. I remember thinking, well, this is unrelentingly bleak. And even at 37%, I thought, I don't think I can go on any further with this. So I actually DNF'd it. The book is The Night Watch by Jayne and Phillips. I thought it had all of the right elements: historical book, literary prize, shortlist. I thought it was going to be a good one, and it started off so promising. So it's set in the Civil War times of the American South, and we meet Connolly, and Connolly is 12 years old, and she's very upset. Her mother is not doing well. Her mother is mentally not doing well. And father is making some changes and making some decisions. He has found a place to take care of her mother, Eliza. Meanwhile, he has given away and sent away all of the very young children and babies to other people. It packed them up and is taking them somewhere. Connolly thinks that they're dropping her off at a hospital. It's only when they are about to pull up into the gates that he turns to Connolly and tells her that the plan is that he's going to leave them both there and they're both going to stay. But she cannot admit that she is Eliza's daughter. She has to say that she is a nurse. Eliza needs her, because otherwise she becomes very violent, and she's the only person that Eliza will talk to. and they're going to now live there. And he is going to go on his way. And he also drops the bombshell that he is not her father. And that her safety and her mother's safety require her to play this role. So that immediately was a very interesting premise. And I was kind of into it. And I just really liked the voice of Connolly. She felt very rational, very kind, sweet girl who was trying to make the best of these very confusing, very difficult circumstances. Then it switches into a different voice, a few different voices. We hear from a sharpshooter who it turns out is Connolly's actual father. And we also hear from a woman that is his adopted mother, foster mother, someone who has looked after Eliza and Connolly during the Civil War in their isolation, because they were kind of way up in the mountains where the sharpshooter thought they'd be safe. I was a little confused with some of the voices, didn't really understand how it all fit together. Felt the language to be overly flowery, overly overwrought a little bit, especially in the voice of the sharpshooter, just didn't feel authentic. Seemed like there would be that type of language used. So there wasn't really a difference in voice enough for me to kind of buy it. Then we get into a really prolonged set of scenes where a small group of people that are on the move find this hidden little spot where Coralie and Eliza are living with the family and the babies. And it was brutal. Kidnapping, rape, assault, mental torture. And I thought, it's only 37% in, and it's already so dark, so painful, so confusing and difficult to read. I just don't want to do this. And so voila, I DNF'd it. So I would really like to know, if you've read that book, what your thoughts were. So I was very surprised. I thought there would be more beauty in the writing, or not as unrelentlessly dark. But there we go. So after that, I needed something light. So I turned to this, and this was exactly what I wanted. This is Day at the Morisaki Bookshop. This turns out to be #1, and I really hope this becomes a series because it was so charming. And it was written by Satoshi Yagisawa and translated by Eric Ozawa. I loved this little charming, sweet, tender, heart-filled book. We open with this very shocking scene where Takako is having dinner with her boyfriend, and she thinks it's a normal dinner, and this is someone that she works with. So they've been secretly seeing each other for a while, a good while actually. And out of nowhere, he says that he's getting married, not to her. So it turns out that he was also seeing someone at the office, and they're actually going to get married. And Takako had absolutely no idea that this was happening. She's devastated. He's completely oblivious and wants to just kind of keep going. And, it shouldn't have to change anything with their relationship. And then he starts talking to her about the wedding, completely oblivious to the pain that he is causing her. This really sets her into a spiral, and she ends up quitting her job and losing her boyfriend, leaving him, and kind of at a loss. She gets a call from her uncle, and she's always found her uncle to be a little on the weird side. He's a little bizarre. He's very emotional, very direct. And he owns the grandfather's used bookstore, secondhand bookstore, in this charming little neighborhood of Tokyo with a lot of other secondhand booksellers. And he offers her to stay while she kind of gets back on her feet. And she'd be doing him a favor because he could use the help. She, despite being a little affronted at his boldness, she agrees to it. And it ends up being the best thing she could have ever done. She completely recuperates due to the charm of the eccentric people around her, including her uncle. She is inspired by his fierce love of her, including one hilarious scene where he tries to defend her honor, which is just so wonderful. And she gets herself to a point where she's strong enough that she can actually be there for him in a way that he really needs, because his wife had left. It just disappeared, left a note and disappeared one day 6 years earlier. And after Takako, it feels better and is able to get back on her feet, she leaves the bookstore and goes out on her own. But she gets a call one day saying that his wife is back. And that pulls her back in to see if she can actually help her uncle. This was charming. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It's a delightful little book. If you need a palate cleanser, if the world is getting a little too intense and you're feeling that you need to feel some warmth, this is the book for you. Then Leo and I read a book together. I mentioned this. Leo and we had our first meeting in real life, in person, a year and a half ago, I think it was. And we met in Manchester. And we met there because we wanted to go to the Elizabeth Gaskell house. And while we were there, we both bought this edition and we read it together this October. This is The Grey Lady by Elizabeth Gaskell. Really pretty cover here. This is a novella, so small little book, beautifully paced. I thought it was going to be a Gothic novel, but it's more of a sensational novel, which is like akin to like an adventure suspenseful type of book. Elizabeth Gaskell has just a sharp writing style, so astute, so smart. The book just flows so smoothly. We open up with a visit to this milliner and a lunch and a really charming scene where the rain starts pouring and everyone has been sitting outside enjoying the view and enjoying this very simple German milliner lunch at this very simple mill. And the rain starts to fall and the family runs out with umbrellas and brings all of the people into their house, and everyone is standing there and the dogs are under the table and everyone's getting warm, but completely drenched and laughing. They ask to see the wife of the owner of this mill and restaurant and cafe, and it turns out she's paralyzed. And so they go into her room to chat with her and see how she's doing. And she's a very vivacious woman despite being paralyzed. And as they're having a chat and conversation, our opening narrator looks at a painting. And that painting shows a woman who looks completely grayed out. And she's so intrigued by this that she asks about, who is this? What's the story behind this painting? And the milliner comes in and says, it's an old family story. It's too long to explain, but here are the family letters. I'll give them to you. You can read them, but bring them back. And so that starts off the story, kicks it off. And we have this epistolary novel of this woman, Anna, who's young and a little naive and gets kind of swept up in society. Her sister-in-law keeps pushing her to get married so she can leave the house, so she can have the home all to herself. And she gets swayed and kind of pulled into the clutches of this very dandy, very rich man. So the family absolutely approves. And very quickly, she doesn't even realize what's happening. Even by talking with him and being seen with him, she's somehow submitting to a marriage. She ends up getting married to this man and is immediately sent off to his very, very cold, drafty, old castle. And he's a very controlling man. He's very difficult. She doesn't really understand him. She's kind of afraid. He brings in an older woman who's kind of a companion to her, and something happens one night in the castle that sets them off and fleeing for their lives. So there's a ton of adventure. There's a ton of interesting escapades and written really, really well. And there's even hints of what could either be lesbianism, lesbian relationship between these two women, but definitely gender questions at play, where they're based on how they choose to hide themselves and how they choose to comport themselves as they're on the run. I won't say too much there, except that those were choices that Elizabeth Gaskell made that I'm very, very curious about learning a little bit more. And I wish I had read this before Leo and I went, because I would have loved to talk to the people, the amazing volunteers at the Elizabeth Gaskell House, to ask them about this. So I think it was a really great palate cleanser for Victober. I did think the very last sentence was a little weak because it refers to something that was just alluded to very quickly, very slightly. And thank goodness I read with Leo, because he was able to answer it real quick. But it had completely gone over my head. But it was a nice way to tie it all together. I wish there had been a little more drops of hints along the way. But other than that, great to do a nice little buddy read with Leo for Victober. So that's what I read. I am currently reading so many books, but most of them I'm near finishing. This one I'm not near finishing. This is Deerbrook by Harriet Martineau, this gorgeous Virago Modern Classic Edition. The font on this is so freaking tiny. I'm not sure if you can see this. It is so small that I actually had to download it to my Kindle and read on my Kindle, because it was hurting my eyes, and I just thought I'll never finish it. So I'm very glad I did that. So now it's progressing a little bit faster because of that. I also finished this, but I'm going to have my conversation with my In Real Life book club about this and another book that I'm reading. So I'm going to hold this to talk about until next week. This is Mother Dead by Vigdis Hjorth. And this is translated by Charlotte Barslund. So stay tuned for that review next week. Also for my In Real Life book club, reading Time Shelter by Georgi Gospodinov. And this is translated from Bulgarian by Angela Rodel. This is very interesting. I'm really looking forward to getting to this week. Then I started this little slim, fun little novella, I should say. It's The Diary of a Nobody by George and Whedon Grossmith. So amusing little story about this guy who decides that he's going to write his own diary because he sees other people doing it, but he's just like this normal guy. So already starting off to be an amusing little read. Then I'm continuing on, finishing up this. This is Helen DeWitt's Some Trick, 13 stories. So we have 2 more stories in here, and also then moving on to this, The English Understand Wool, and completing the Helen DeWitt author spotlight series that I've been doing with some wonderful people. And then lastly, I'm listening to an audiobook, and this is Lost in Paris by, I forget the name of the author. I'll put a link to it below, and you can see the cover right here. So that's what I'm currently reading. Yeah, it feels like a lot, but at the same time, I'm making good progress. I should be done with some of these very quickly. So I would love to know, have you read any of these? What were your thoughts? Especially if you read Night Watch, and what were your thoughts about that? Did I make the right decision? Would it have gotten even worse before it got better? Did it get better? Yeah, and I hope you have a fantastic reading week ahead of you. I'll look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.